On a quiet road in the cool of the evening, I had been by myself. I was relieved to see a dilapidated gas station up ahead because my fuel gauge was dangerously low. The advertisement for snacks and fuel shone brightly. As I came to a stop, I slowed down and pulled up. The gas station appeared vintage and gave off the impression that it belonged to a bygone era. I shivered due to the wind and the cold. Near the entrance, I noticed a bulletin board with torn papers. The image of a happy man with the word "missing" written over his head caught my attention the most. When I considered what his family must be going through, I got depressed. As I began to fill up my car, I saw an elderly man leave the gas station store. He had a messy beard, and it was difficult to see his eyes through his glasses. He said, "Evening," in a rough voice that suggested he hadn't recently spoken to many people. I said, "Hey," and spoke in a friendly manner. "I simply require some gas and a snack." The man appeared to be taking it all in while nodding and scanning his surroundings. He held out his hand and said, "Joe." Mark was the name I gave him when I shook his hand. Joe leaned against the gas pump and his actions began to seem a little strange as I pumped gas, but he didn't say much, so I started a conversation about the missing man. "So, there's someone missing around here?" I pointed at the image of the missing person. He said, "Yeah, it's heartbreaking when someone vanishes." Joe's fingers were still tapping on the pump, but he seemed uneasy. "It's depressing. Many people have asked me about him here. I wonder where he will be." I found Joe's conversation about the missing man to be strange in some ways. He seemed to be hiding something from me. Hoping to get more information, I said, "It must be difficult for his family." Joe spoke quietly after his expression changed. He said that it indeed has been challenging. I grew more wary of him as a result of his words and his downward gaze. I queried, thinking there must be more to Joe's story, so I asked him if he knew the guy. Joe made a small smile with a twitch of his lips. "Yes, I was familiar with him. On the other hand, some things are better left in the past. It's pointless to dig up the past." After thanking Joe, I finished pumping gas, but something didn't feel right. When discussing the missing man, he acted in a peculiar manner. He appeared to be concealing something. I kept thinking about the gas station for the next few days. I began researching the story of the missing man because something didn't feel right to me. I conducted an online search, read news articles, and pursued neighborhood forums. However, it became more perplexing the more I looked. The man appeared to have vanished into thin air. To confront Joe, I made the decision to return to the gas station. The atmosphere was eerie when I got there. Odd shadows were created by flickering lights. When I entered the store, I saw Joe putting a fresh flyer on the notice board. When I noticed that my picture was on the flyer, my heart began to race. Joe turned in my direction before I could respond. "Mark, you shouldn't have come back," he said, his eyes strange. I jumped to my feet in a frenzied stance. Joe grabbed my wrist with a firm grip that felt like steel. "Sorry, Mark. You were approaching too quickly, similar to other people." I was able to escape and I sped off in my car. After arriving in town, I made the police call without stopping. They seemed dubious despite everything I told them. The investigation appeared to stall as time went on. Nothing turned up in my ongoing search for solutions. Then, I came across a news report titled, "Missing Man Found Dead in Gas Station Basement." Reading it caused chills in me. The body of the missing man was discovered by police in the gas station's basement. I never got the full story, never discovered what Joe was trying to hide, but I still get the chills thinking about that gas station. I managed to avoid becoming a part of its secrets, but I can't get rid of the impression that something strange is still present. The whole family used to visit this place. They asked me to assist them in locating him. I could only do so little, though. In the middle of the night, I was traveling down that lengthy, winding road. The only indication of civilization was an old gas station with poor lighting, as my gas gauge was almost on E. It looked like it had not undergone renovation since the 1970s, a location that had previously been better, but those times were long past. I had to fill up and stretch my legs out of desperation, so I pulled in. I felt a chill run down my spine as I approached the rusted pumps. The attendant was there. He appeared shorter than he actually was due to his somewhat hunched back, and his face had aged like he was 20 years older than he was. His piercing, almost unnerving, intense eyes were the worst part. Trying to get rid of the unease, I looked away. I murmured, handing him my credit card.
"Fill it up, regular, please."
He didn't say anything. Instead, he simply took the card in his gnarled hand and swiped it through an antiquated device that appeared to have been retrieved from the dead. In the strange nighttime silence, the metallic swipe echoed. I walked around a bit, looking around as the pump began its laborious operation. I turned to face the attendant, who was now seated by the gas pump and keeping a close eye on me. My neck's back hairs stood up. I said, more out of habit than anything else,
"Nice night, huh?"
He didn't respond right away. He just kept those unsettling eyes on me. He finally spoke. His voice, a low rasp, caused me to shiver once more. He cryptically remarked,
"Nice enough for those who don't know what lurks."
Indecisive as to whether he was attempting to frighten me or simply striking up a conversation in his peculiar way, I raised an eyebrow. His hushed tone was conspiratorial as he leaned in closer.
"This place, this land, has witnessed its fair share of gruesome tales. Never to be found individuals have vanished."
Although my skepticism was winning out, I couldn't help but notice his intensity.
"Missing? Do you mean that they were abducted or lost their way or something?"
His eyes were still fixed on mine as he nodded.
"Some claim that something in these woods calls to those who dare to come too close. Shadows that devour even the bravest souls are described in whispers on the wind."
I giggled apprehensively, unsure of whether he was trying to scare me or if he really did think this stuff. I told him I will definitely stay in the light then. He chuckled softly, which made my skin tingle. He told me the light was not always a shield, and that even in the most lit places, darkness finds its way to me. He handed my card back to me after the pump finally shut off. I thanked him and practically leaped into my car, feeling like I was escaping some sort of trap. I briefly turned around as I started to pull away, and the attendant was still there, staring directly at me. I couldn't help but feel like something was off about that place, and the road in front of me appeared darker than I recalled. In an effort to block out the growing unease, I turned up the radio. However, the attendant's words continued to play a menacing melody in my head. Miles went by, but the sense of being watched persisted. It seemed as though those menacing eyes were still following my every move. The tales he had told, too, persisted. They were tales of people who had vanished into thin air, sucked up by the shadows of these very woods. Suddenly, I noticed that the gas gauge had remained at E. The attendant had made fun of me and apparently never actually put gas in my car, but there was no way to turn back. Up ahead, I at last noticed a sign for another gas station that was more up to date. As I pulled in, a wave of relief swept over me. In sharp contrast to the unsettling isolation of the previous stop, the busy atmosphere and bright lights were present here. I pumped my gas quickly, attempting to get as far away from that unsettling attendant as I could. I was standing by my car when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. He was there when I turned, my heart pounding. The attendant was observing me from the edge of the gas station's property while standing there. My heart raced and I jumped in my car and sped away, not looking back until I was sure I was far from that accursed place. The rest of my journey was tense because every shadow and rustling leaf sent my imagination into overdrive. I was a nervous wreck when I eventually got where I was going. I never learned what that attendant was up to, whether he was just a lonely old man who enjoyed scary stories or something much scarier. I was so bored that I leaned against the counter. Especially on a weekday, the night shift at the gas station was rarely busy. I was getting no action other than the occasional car pulling in to get gas or a bag of chips. When my phone rang, I was about halfway through a magazine. The sound was like a knife cutting through the stillness. My voice was drained as I picked up the phone and said,
"Hey, welcome to the gas station. How may I be of assistance?"
Silence. I scowled and questioned whether it was a prank call.
"I know you're alone."
A low, raspy voice slithered through the phone. My grip on the phone became more tenacious as chills spread up my spine.
"Okay, is there anything I can help you with?"
I felt shivers run down my arms as a dry chuckle followed. He responded that I didn't know him and that we were going to keep it that way. My heart was thumping in my chest as I looked around the shop.
"If this is a joke, it's not funny." "This is not a joke, my friend."
My mouth went dry and I forced a hard swallow.
"Who is this?" "Someone who is keeping an eye on you."
I quickly focused on the security camera screen. The parking lot was deserted and lit only by ominous fluorescence. I had enough and said I was going to hang up the phone and that I didn't feel like playing games.
"Go ahead, but keep in mind that I know more about you than you might believe."
I put down the phone and rubbed my temples. I assumed that he was just a sicko looking for a thrill, but the words persisted, gnawed at me. My heart was still racing as I took another look around the store. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. I hesitated before picking up.
"I've had it with your nonsense. Look, if you call again, I'll call the police." "Strong words, my friend. You won't, though. You don't want them to learn about your little secrets."
My heartbeat picked up, and I noticed a drop of sweat dripping from my forehead. Once more, the voice chuckled, sending a chill down my spine.
"Soon enough, you'll learn the truth."
I dropped the phone once more and took a trembling breath. I cast a glance out the window, half expecting to spot someone hiding in the shadows. However, there was nothing but the deserted parking lot and the faint glow of nearby streetlights. The calls continued throughout the night, growing increasingly ominous. The caller seemed to know details about me that were private and that I had never disclosed to anyone. It appeared as though they had removed the layers of my life and were holding them up for me to see. As I answered another call, my hands began to shake.
"Hear me out, you sick freak. You are mistaken if you believe that you have scared me. The police have already been called."
A cold and poisonous whisper could now be heard coming from the other end.
"You are not safe from the police."
My heart was pounding like a runaway train as I slammed the phone to the ground while swearing. I grabbed my own phone and dialed 911, explaining the situation while trembling. The operator gave me the reassurance that a patrol car would be dispatched to the area to investigate. I huddled up behind the counter and kept my eye on the clock as the minutes passed. I jumped at every sound, including the wind rustling through the trees outside and distant car engines. It felt as though the bad guy was closing in on me in a horror movie. Finally, as the patrol car pulled into the parking lot, the store was flooded with the welcome sight of flashing blue and red lights. I was so relieved that I hurried outside to meet the police. I rushed through my explanations as I spoke to them. While listening intently, they looked at each other. They returned after thoroughly searching the area, shaking their heads. No one has been seen, according to one of the officers.
We'll monitor the area tonight. Call us if anything else occurs.
I gave them a grateful nod as they walked away. I locked the doors and drew the blinds as they left. The rest of the night was spent in a blur of fear and anxiety as I kept hearing that raspy voice in my head. A sense of relief descended when the morning finally arrived. The shadows that had seemed so ominous only a few hours earlier were chased away by the sunlight that peeked through the windows. No calls were missed when I checked my phone. Perhaps the nightmare had ended. To let in more light, I unlocked the front door, but as I did, I noticed something. There was a piece of paper stuck with tape on the window. I peeled it off and read the scrawled words, "I'll be seeing you." The note was ripped to pieces and I balled it up in my hand. The sense of being watched and hunted grew stronger. They were closer than I had anticipated, whoever this sicko was. They were aware of my residence and my place of employment. I took a quick look around, focusing on the houses in the area. I realized that the threat was much closer than I had ever imagined, and I wondered if it might be a neighbor or coworker. Every new face seemed suspicious after that day. My heart beat faster every time the phone rang. My former familiar surroundings were now tinged with fear, and I was perpetually uneasy. Although there were only a few leads, the police kept looking. Every dead end left me more irate and terrified because the anonymous caller had left no evidence. The calls eventually stopped as the months went by. Even though the memory of that eerie voice and those terrifying words haunted my dreams, life gradually began to feel more normal. I still, however, have the sense that I am being watched. I can't get rid of the worry that one day I'll turn around and see the person who had terrorized my nights and destroyed my sense of security.